let's start with the Commanders news of the day because I thought this was actually a pretty big deal. The Commanders opened the 21-day window for Jon Allen to return before the end of the season. And it sounds like Allen is expecting to potentially play against the Falcons next week.
Pretty crazy.
That he may very well get to play not once, but twice to end the regular year and then in the playoff game. I think a lot of us, when they ruled him out and said he was going to have surgery, the reports were that he was out for the season with a torn pec. That's normally a year-ender, and you're back into the offseason. Apparently, he knew right away with surgery that it wasn't as bad a tear as was originally assumed, which is really good, and that there was a chance he could get back. He's been working diligently, grinding. A lot of people have said this along the way, but you and I have talked about how badly we felt for the guy because he's been here for so many years when they weren't good, when they weren't 9-5, when they weren't headed to the playoffs. It was a real bummer that he wouldn't get to enjoy the stretch run. Well, maybe now he'll get to play in a win-and-in game against the Falcons next week. Perhaps he'll get to play in a clincher the week after that, if that's how it works out, in Dallas. And he'll get to play in a playoff game if they make the postseason.
He deserves a lot of credit. And here's where I'm going with this. A lot of folks may roll their eyes and just sort of say, you're paid so much money, you should. Here's what I'll tell you. There's a great chance, whether it happens this way or not, I don't know internally what they're thinking, but there is an off-ramp here for one of their highly compensated players. He's got a cap hit next year of $23 million. They may want to reallocate that. They may want to just keep him. I mean, who knows? But there's a chance he's played his last game in Washington. This is now with that injury. You're 100% right that he didn't get to experience the reward. It would be very, very easy for a guy coming off an injury looking to cash in and sign somewhere else in free agency to have that just have been his last game, right? I mean, you're talking about, I would say rushing back because obviously you're not going to do anything medically reckless, but doing everything you possibly can to come back, to be there with the guys that you're laying on the line with just for a couple more games and maybe the postseason. Really, really cool, man. I mean, again, a lot of guys have made a lot of business decisions where we wouldn't have known better either way, because when you hear torn pec, you're going, he's gone. He's done. There's no way he comes back. But doing everything you possibly can to make sure that you can come back, even if it's for a week or 2 weeks or, you get 3 games out of it. Pretty credible, man. Speaks to the man.
So I'm not surprised at all that Jon Allen gets back because he is such a worker, right? A leader of men type. Alabama champion, one of the guys that's run the locker room here for several years. I do think there are some other factors at play, which is to say, number one, from a team standpoint, I'm sure he wants to play in the playoffs. He has never gotten to play in the postseason environments that he wants to the extent that he'd like to as a player in Washington here. And I'm sure that's going to mean something to him. The other thing is, as you pointed out, I do not believe he is likely to be back here next year based on not having any guaranteed money on his contract. If that's the case, then he's going to be a free agent. To go into free agency off of a torn pec, not having played since October 13th against the Baltimore Ravens when he suffered the injury in week 6 with a 6-week sample where, frankly, he just wasn't playing at his normal Pro Bowl caliber level, might have cost him more money than if he's able to come back and play a couple games at a high level. And we have no idea, but let's just say he plays against the Falcons, has a sack and a tackle for loss, right? Then he plays against the Cowboys end of the year, getting into football shape, makes a couple more plays in the backfield, and then he goes out and he has a sack and a half or 2 sacks or 3 hits on the quarterback in a playoff loss or something like that. There's tape now at the end of the year where, number one, the pec is fine. Number two, this guy still got it at 29 years old. This is someone you want to pay if he becomes available. So I think he can get what he wants out of it, which is to play in a playoff game. He can get what he needs out of it financially and from a business standpoint, which is to make some money this offseason potentially. So everybody wins here. And oh, by the way, for a Commanders team that's been playing, Sheldon Day and some other guys they signed off the street as the season went along, they could benefit if he comes back and plays at his ceiling, which is still higher than that of most of the D tackles on this roster.
Yeah, welcome reinforcements for sure for a group that, maybe now with Lattimore can be a little bit more aggressive up front there, right? You saw a pretty good performance against New Orleans. That's to me as good as they've looked stuff in the run. And I'm, I don't know if you stuff Philadelphia like that with Barkley, not quite on pace anymore to set the record, but still 2,000-yard pace. Jalen Hurts, as good a runner as he is, et cetera. But yeah, you could use reinforcements as you come into the playoffs for sure. And think about this. You wouldn't use this as a strategy, obviously, but there's a benefit maybe not having the wear and tear on your body over, these last couple of months that everyone else has. He comes back and he's fresh. sort of down the stretch here as everyone else is pretty beat up.
Jon Allen, 21-day window opened, back on the practice field. He will be ramping up his workload. He will not play against Philadelphia this weekend, obviously. But from what I'm told, there is a chance he could be back on the game field against the Falcons, and then he would finish the season against the Cowboys with the hope of him being able to help them in the playoffs. Supposedly, and this was via some reporting from John Keim of ESPN about 5 days ago now, they realized when they went in to do the operation that even though they thought it was a full tear, it was only a partial tear. And that's the difference between like them saying he's out for the year and him actually coming back. It's not like he tore it full and he's just coming back anyway. They basically went in there, and I guess that day of the operation, they told him after the Week 6 injury against the Ravens in Baltimore, hey, you actually might be able to get back. No guarantees here, but if everything goes well, the timeline's probably late December more than it is, late January, February.
Yeah.
And so that's all of a sudden something you can dangle in front of yourself, and he put in the work. So full credit to him. I think that up front defensively without him, while it hasn't been perfect, they've gotten decent production out of some of the other guys they've tapped into, to the point that they have started to deactivate Fidarian Mathis.
Mm-hmm.
Like the last couple of games, he's been a healthy scratch because they kind of like Sheldon Day and some of these guys they've been using as space-eating presences against the run. I thought they did a really good job against the run early against the Saints.
They were really good. I mean, the only rushing totals that happened later in the game, I think, to me, were about the 2-minute drill where you're playing coverage and New Orleans ambushed you a couple times with Kendre Miller on some carries, but even still, that was only 5 yards a pop a handful of times. Alvin Kamara, an excellent running back, was stuffed. Period. End of story. They were really good. A lot of negative runs, and New Orleans pretty much abandoned it after running into a couple brick walls. So, again, I don't think you do that to Philadelphia. I don't think anybody really gets to. Pittsburgh did as good a job as you're going to find. They held Barkley to 60-some yards. I don't think you're doing much better than that, as good as he's been against Washington over the years. But, yeah, you could say they're doing okay in that regard, right? I mean, there have been moments of sort of pass rushing flurry from Fowler, and Armstrong actually probably had his best game in a while against New Orleans on Sunday. Not a huge stat line to show for it, but I thought he was very active. So it's an okay group. And they're middle of the pack in a lot of different categories. We look at sacks and pressures and quarterback hits and things like that, to go with I'd say a slightly improving trend line against the run. So, yeah, but again, always good to have a good player come back, even if it's in a limited capacity.
2.4 a pop for Alvin Kamara. I will sign up for every
time, please.
Single time. And then the Tennessee game where the Titans were a pretty good running team. Now, some of this was the score, and they had to throw it as the game went on. But, they held Pollard to 35 yards rushing, I think, on 9 attempts. I mean, they did a really good job on him, and Spears combined sub 40 yards between the two of them. So that's back-to-back games now where they've been very solid against the run. The reason I want Allen back, and the reason Allen's best is still better than a lot of the guys that they've got, is the pass rushing ability. It's why he goes in the first round. It's why he's been to Pro Bowls. It's why he's a star. We've seen him go out and get double-digit sacks, right? You've seen him, like Daron Payne had the big year. He had the 11 sacks. I guess Allen has not gotten to that number, but the tackles for loss, some of the pass rushing metrics for him over the years have shown that he can do that. The team that they play a week from Sunday after the Eagles game is the Falcons, and we found out last night, Danny, that there will be no reunion, barring something happening to Michael Penix this weekend, for Kirk Cousins back on the field against the Commanders. Would have been, I think, his third time playing against Washington, because he played them with the Vikings twice. Minnesota going 2-0 in those games, once on the road and then once here. But there will be no third chance for Washington at Cousins. He got benched by the Falcons yesterday. They're going to their rookie, Michael Penix, out of Washington with 3 games to go. And Atlanta's in a golden spot. They're dropping Penix into a really nice landing spot here because they play the Giants as favorites. They should win that game. Then they come to Washington. They'll be underdogs, I'd imagine. It's going to be a close game. It'll be a tough game. But if they could somehow win that, then they'd enter Week 18 ahead of the Commanders in the wild card standings, even if they haven't caught the Bucs yet for the NFC West.
Yeah, I mean, this is
South, rather.
Right. This had to happen, I think, which is strange to say, but we use this. I use this word sometimes. I was thinking about it. Usually reserved for someone like a Bryce Young or Carson Wentz, when whatever ability you may have had, you can't get anymore. Like, you can't use your abilities. Broken. is the word. And that's what Cousins looks like right now, is whether it's physical. I mean, you could see something physically is not right. Like, he can't get to the point where he's making the handoff. I'm not talking about the straight, I formation, turnaround hand to somebody. Those famous Shanahan stretch runs, those stretch zone plays where Peyton Manning, by the end of his career, was lunging to get the ball to a running back that's got to hit a target point. He can't do it. He had to pitch them a few different times. Whether he's not stepping into throws or doesn't physically trust it. I think now it's gotten in his head, and it's now this compounding effect. This is not good the way he's played. Again, 1 touchdown and 9 pick over his last 5 games, not really giving them a chance. Their offense doesn't look very good. So in that sense, good luck to Michael Penix. Again, the offense doesn't look like it's humming, but maybe there's a better fit. Just physically right now, Cousins looks broken. So maybe Penix will give him kind of that shot in the arm, because physically he's pretty gifted and pretty good. I mean, he's not running around like Jaden Daniels or anything, but he can move a little bit and can sling it. So, maybe the offense is different that way. It still goes through Bijan Robinson, honestly, and that's kind of what I would major into. But yeah, this is, if it doesn't work, whatever was happening wasn't working. So this is one of those like high pressure because it's for playoffs, but it's also lower pressure because it's not as if he was walking into a great situation where they were buzzsawing people and now he has to play. This is like our offense barely managed a forward pass against the Raiders, who are terrible. Do slightly better than that, and you'll be a hero.
Yeah, I think the key for Penix is going to be not turning the football over, because
Agreed.
Especially in this game against the Giants, like if you don't turn the ball over with their running game, and their defense has played better the last couple of weeks. They were terrible for most of the season, but they actually have played some of their best football the last couple of weeks, which is maybe why they're making this change where they're going, hey, we got to stop turning the ball over. I mean, Cousins has thrown 7 picks in the last 3 games. He had the 4 interception game that was brutal against the Chargers. But that's kind of where it's at. Like, the 16 picks speak for themselves. You can't keep turning the ball over. And week in and week out, they go into these games, and oftentimes it's a 1st and 10 and plus territory interception. Yesterday or Sunday, Monday night, I guess it was, they're playing against the Raiders. The first play of the second half, they get a big kick return to like the 40-yard line. They come out, they lead the game 9-3, I think it was. They got a lot of momentum. Everyone's jumping around after special teams gets them a big return. And it's the first play of the second half. Cousins in the gun, throws a pick in the middle of the field. And now on a short field, here come the Raiders. So they made the change, I think, just because they can't keep doing the interception thing. And there were just too many of them, too many of those mistakes. He is in a rut from a mental and confidence standpoint that I haven't seen since 2014 when Jay benched him. And if you remember back then, Jay said, I think he told Cousins this, I'm not benching you because you can't play. I'm benching you because you got to get out of your own head. What I don't know about him right now is how much does he have left from a base and legs standpoint? How much of this is the natural recovery from the Achilles, which happened, around October of last year, him not trusting it? That's what I don't know. But I think it's been a bad situation there from the beginning. They told him they weren't going to draft a quarterback. They immediately draft Penix in the top 10. You got to get over that, but that's how it all starts. Then you come in there and they run nothing that he runs well. There's no under center drop back. There's no play action. Everything's at a pistol. It's been confounding to me all year long. But he's played really poorly, and he turns the ball over week in and week out. And so they made the change. I'm still a little surprised that they did, because Raheem Morris, as recently as a week ago, was talking about how they're not going to make a change. He's rolling with the veteran. Cousins deserves the time. And I guess they just decided they'd given him enough time. But it's after a win when he did have the pick. But I didn't think it was like awful this past Monday night. I thought he looked bad physically, and maybe that's what it was.
I think that's it to me.
But they ran the ball in 17 of their final 23 plays, and 4 of the 6 passes were on 3rd and 9 or longer. Like, there's no real chance to have a passing game there in the second half of that game. Now, if someone says, well, they called the game that way because they don't trust him to not throw a pick, well, then you can't play him, if that's the case.
Yeah, that's kind of my thinking.
I don't know if
there.
That's the case, but if that was the case, why did you start him against the Raiders anyway?
Right. I think physically it ain't right. I don't know if it's ever going to be right again, or if it's just not right now. You know what I mean? I don't know if if it's the Achilles, if there's something new.
He's 36 off of an Achilles, and they're going to end up paying him about $90 million for 14 starts, by the way. He made, close to 60 this year. They owe him another close to 30 next year. But someone could bring him in via trade at about $27 million next year.
There'll be some vacancies, and guys may not be able to pick right at the top of the board.
I wonder, though, like, the question's going to be, do you think that this year was the beginning of him just not being able to move anymore? and he's just now, because of this Achilles, he's immobile. You know where he's at. He can't anchor off that back foot and drive it? Or do you feel like this is a bad rut he got into in a situation that's not ideal schematically, maybe, or whatever, and you think you could bring him in and he could run your thing, and there's a suitor at $27 million? When he had a 500-yard, 4-touchdown game this year. Like, it's not like it was all terrible, right? So I'll be really fascinated to see if there's a market or what that looks like, or if he wants to keep playing.
Yeah.
I mean, if he really is as bothered as it looks like he is, as you said, when he's moving around trying to hand the ball off and stuff, he's made all the money. He's got a couple of kids and a wife. He could just say, you know what? I had a 14-year career as a 4th-round pick. I'll go do TV or whatever it is.
A lot of zeros and commas in my paychecks over the years. So my feeling is that this is an additional, and no one's reported this, but I think there's an additional injury situation now, in addition, as he's also recovering from the Achilles. So he was never going to be like the high jump champion or the sprint champion. He's not going to win the 4-cone drill. That's never who he was. But you could see it at times early in the season where he couldn't plant on that back foot and then push off and drive the ball. Looks like he's throwing a Todd Collins changeup in some of the balls that you're used to him driving in there. He's never had the Brett Favre howitzer, but not that many guys have. It wasn't what his game was. But even now, losing miles per hour off his fastball looks like it's gotten more exasperated. Now, at this point in the season, you mentioned there were some good moments where he looked like he had his legs under him. Now looks something different again. And I don't know if it's an ankle. I don't know exactly what's going on. I haven't followed it tremendously closely, but physically, he just doesn't look right to me. I think that's where the discussion is. And because you're compensating, you don't trust anything. You don't trust your body. You don't trust your eyes. You don't trust any part of you. And so now you look broken. I think all you need is time, healing, new situation, and I think he could still play. But who knows if that's going to plan out that way.
I think Penix is actually going to be a really good fit for what they do right now. I think they kind of built a offense that really works for Penix more than even Cousins, in that, again, there's 0 bootlegs, there's 0 play action, there's nothing under center. It's a college, like what he did at Washington, kind of. Everything's in the pistol.
I've always liked him, by the way. I didn't understand why he didn't get more
super
fanfare.
Accurate.
Yeah,
I agree with you. I think he can throw the football. But my guess is that the offense they built is like, it's Penix, right? So they drop him in, and my guess is that he'll be able to throw the football around a little bit, and he'll have success. Bijan Robinson's got the running game going. So they're going to be a tough out next week for Washington.
Agreed.
I think they would have been anyway, and they're now with a more athletic possible quarterback who's feeling better under center, or in their case, in the pistol. It's going to be a tough team to beat. But speaking of injuries, we talked about the return of Jon Allen. Marshawn Lattimore is back for Washington as well. How does this change the defensive outlook for the remainder of the season for their final 3 matchups? And what do we expect from this defense down the stretch?